Gather round, everyone, and prepare to be swept away by the thrilling exploits of Gino Cuddy, Clive Davis, and Nick Sheehan as they embark on a daring journey across the silent screen. They'll ride through the annals of film history, recounting the captivating saga of the silver screen's very first Western superstar. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast. I'm, of course, one of your co-hosts, Gino Cuddy, and I'm here with my regular co-hosts, Clive Davis and Nick Sheehan. And for the first film that we're going to be discussing, we're actually joined by a guest, and that guest is none other than film historian and multi-film book author, James L. Neibaur. And the film that we're going to be starting off with is the film The Toll Gate, which was released April 25th, 1920. This was preceded by an unavailable film that we don't have access to called John Petticoats. And The Toll Gate was produced by the William S. Hart Company, distributed by Paramount Artcraft, and directed by Lambert Hillier, with a screenplay by Lambert Hillier and William S. Hart from the story By Their Fruits Ye Shall Know Them by William S. Hart. This film was photographed by Joe August, with art direction being handled by Thomas A. Brearley. It was edited by Leroy Hunt, with art titles by Harry Barndollar. And the cast consists of Black Deering, being portrayed by William S. Hart, Mary Brown, being portrayed by Anna Q. Nilsson, the Sheriff, being portrayed by Jack Richardson, Tom Jordan, being portrayed by Joseph Singleton, the Little Feller, being portrayed by Richard Hedrick, and Fritz, portraying himself. And here is the synopsis. The toll gate through which Black Deering passed into the life of an outlaw was one which shut him out of the natural joys of life. From that moment, he plunders until he becomes the leader of a desperate band in the Southwest. Finding that the forces arrayed against him and his followers are bound to win in the end, he announces his belief that it is time to disband. Jordan, second in command, urges one more holdup for the sake of getting funds, and the band is with him. They stop a train and begin an attack only to find that they've been betrayed. They are shot down to a man by troops on the train. Deering is captured and securely tied. He feigns unconsciousness and discovers that Jordan has betrayed the band for a reward. He makes a vain attack on the scoundrel in the express car. Later, he escapes, throwing himself out of the train while it is in motion. His one thought is revenge. It is an exhausted outlaw who rides into a small town where Jordan has opened a cantina with the proceeds of his treachery. Deering is hungry, weak, and without ammunition. In spite of these disadvantages, he burns Jordan's place to the ground, robs his enemy of funds, and makes a clean getaway. He is followed by two posses, one of Mexicans under Jordan and another under a manly sheriff. Deering reaches a high bluff over the border and dives from it to rescue a child. It proves to be that of a lonely woman, Mary Brown. In return, Mary protects him from the sheriff's men. Deering is tempted to revenge himself on her when he finds she is Jordan's wife, but his better nature prevails. He kills Jordan in a conflict, but escape from the sheriff is impossible. He sees that the lonely widow is provided for, permitted to go. Because he is over the border, he rides away into a new life, ready to meet what it may bring, a changed man, but not a hopeless one. Now, I'm glad that we have James aboard for this discussion because this was touted all over the movie posters that this was the first, in fact, film under William S. Hart's True Blue production company. It's all over the posters. The first of the films I produced myself and one of my best, says William S. Hart on all of the movie posters. So it is, to my estimation, that this is the first film that William S. Hart has made after disbanding from Thomas H. Ince, who had been producing his films ever since The Bargain in 1914. Now, James is a valued veteran film historian, and I'd like to get his thoughts on what happened between William S. Hart and Thomas H. Ince, and what caused the rift, and what caused them to disband?
Well, William S. Hart had a very focused, very specific idea of what he wanted to do. And as he grew over the past 6 years working for Thomas Ince, he was coming up with different ideas and coming up with different concepts. And Ince had a more, I guess, I don't know if I want to say rigid, but maybe standard method of presenting Hart as an actor and as a character, whereas Hart wanted to explore it a little more carefully, a little more in depth. And you'll notice in this film, William S. Hart is really, he plays a villain essentially. And there's aspects of his villainous portrayal that are, for a nice guy. And Hart was very shrewd because a younger actor couldn't pull this off right. There's a scene when Hart first realizes that Anna Q. Nilsson is Jordan's wife, connected to Jordan. And he stops and he thinks about he's going to take revenge on her. If a younger guy did that, it would come off much differently than it does with Hart, who was like, what, 56 or something like that when he made this? And the fact that his only real option is to turn himself in. That's such an amazing scene. And I don't think that Ince would have been accepting of it because it was pretty innovative. I mean, 1920. So I really think that there was a creative aspect of Hart where he had to, like, you're all familiar with Charlie Chaplin. He had to get away from Senate and go to a company where he had complete control in order to focus on what he wanted to do. Hart was very much like that. He had the same creative aspirations and focus on how he wanted to do his character. And in this film, he really does that for the first time. I mean, he's made great films before this. We've all talked about him, but this one is the one that really kind of sets apart and moves him forward. And it's really fascinating what he was able to do from this point on.
I have a question for you, actually, James. Kind of in that. So obviously, on this in this project, because the whole idea is that we're going through the whole William S. Hart filmography, so makes sense that we're watching these films. And today, for example, we're going to be talking about the two films, and you're talking specifically about The Tollgate, right?
Yes.
And I think for the majority of, kind of cinephiles, this area of cinema is a little dark and murky, and people don't really, know what's what. But what's striking to me, what's interesting is, the Tollgate, right? The Tollgate sticks out for you when you've seen it, and you're going to be talking about The Tollgate, and you're here because you already know The Tollgate. So how did you come across The Tollgate, and why is it one that you know well, if you see what I mean?
Well, this is a fairly interesting question. It's the first William S. Hart movie I saw, and I saw it in the 1960s on a television show called, as I don't know if you guys have heard of this, it's a show called The Toy That Grew Up. And they used to be on PBS in America. I don't even think they were called PBS then. And A Toy That Grew Up would show silent movies, and there was a host, and they would get them from the Killiam collection, Paul Killiam. And there was a host that would talk about them, give some background, and then show the films. Now, I first got attracted to this TV show because the first one I saw, they showed a couple of Keystones. One of them was the Ragtime Band, and that's when I was introduced to Ford Sterling of the Keystone Cops. Well, in this one, it's like, a Western. This is going to be cool because, this is the 60s. I was still going to Westerns at the theater in those days. John Wayne was still very active. So I'm watching this silent Western, and the focus, the sturdiness that Hart showed. It was unlike like John Wayne or Randolph Scott or Jimmy Stewart or anybody I was familiar with. I think the first thing that came close to it was a few years later when I was seeing the spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood. This is a bad guy who's also a good guy, and then a bad guy again. And then the whole thing wraps up where it's pretty ambiguous. There isn't
Right.
this, white hat, black hat sort of thing, like I was kind of used to, especially as a kid, because in the 60s, believe it or not, I wasn't born this old. I was actually a kid in the 60s. So when I first saw that, my grandparents were around in those days, and so I asked them. They went back to silent movies, so I asked them. William S. Hart, and he go, "Oh, he was a big star. We never missed him." And
Wow.
I had known about Tom Mix, and I asked what the difference was, and they said Tom Mix was a lot of action, but William S. Hart were good, serious stories with some good acting.
Right.
And I
Right.
realized, I'm learning this as a kid, so I realized that this is an important film and an important actor. So it's really a marvelous introduction to William S. Hart and his work. But I also got kind of a skewed thing because even though he's very serious in his films, this was the first film where William S. Hart had control of the character, had control of the concept. It was almost like an auteur, other than
Right.
the fact that he didn't direct. And but it was his vision. And I didn't realize that when I would watch something else, like something older, that I would see a different type of perspective to the role. And I had to read up on them, which I did, to understand, the ideas, the differences. But the fact that William S. Hart is so, I mean, the character in this movie is so layered with so many
Mm.
different ideas that I continue to think there might be an element of sentiment, seeing being it was the first movie I saw with him. But I continue to think if it's not his best film, it's got to be in his top five.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the moral ambiguity, and it because I think it's something that people assume started creeping into westerns later on with like the films of Bud Bottica or someone like that, right?
Right.
But yeah, so it is. I was quite surprised by this one myself. I didn't even after seeing something like Hell's Hinges, for example, I was
Yeah.
still kind of surprised by the rampant levels of cynicism and anti-hero-ness in this film.
Yeah. It's very, very dark. And the scene where like they show him like connecting domestically with Anna Q. Nilsson and the little boy. I mean, this is a bad guy who saves a kid from drowning. I mean, come on. And also, when he's tied up on the train, where it's like they find out that even though he's a villain, he did this heroic thing in the war that helped
Mm,
soldiers. And so they're like, leaving the door open, you might escape. They like let him get out because of that. They're thinking, well, we can't hang this guy. I mean,
right.
so many different layers, even to the narrative, that makes this such of a fascinating and exceptional film.
I wondered who did that stunt. So that scene where he's lying down next, they've opened the side door of the
Yeah.
railway carriage. He's lying down. The train is moving slowly, but still, no matter how slow a train is moving, it's still moving. And whoever that was, I don't know that William S. Hart was doing a Tom Cruise or not, whether he was doing his own stunts.
I highly doubt that Hart
Me
was doing his
too.
own stunts. He was pushing 60 back then.
Yeah,
But
but
I,
somebody did. Somebody rolled out of that moving train.
yeah,
To be fair though to Hart, like when we get the tumbleweeds, during the land rush sequence, that's all Hart riding Fritz. Like,
very good point. Very good.
so he very well could have been one of those guys back then who insisted on doing his own stunts.
We could probably we might be able to find this out, guys. That's a very, very good point, Gino. And I didn't think of that. You know what? It might have been Bill himself that did this, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's an impressive. Like it took me aback. I was like, "Whoa, that's a cool stunt." Like it's all done in camera. There's no cutaway. It's just a guy rolling out of a moving train.
Yeah. Speaking of being taken aback as well, there's the scene which did actually cause me to stop and rewind because I thought, oh, I must have missed something when he's just a full-on arsonist and everyone's life be damned. I was like, oh, hang on, I must have missed something, or there's a bit missing, and I, went back and oh no, this guy is just
He's really angry. I mean, so
yeah,
he refers to Jordan as like a Judas, which he clearly is, right? He sold out his gang for money. All the others have been killed, right? And yeah, he's on a, as I said, in that way, it harkens back to um, Hell's Hinges and harkens forward to like High Plains Drifter and any of those kind of like heavy on the revenge westerns. Because you're right, when he's this is William S. Hart off the leash, as far off the leash as we've ever seen him. And yeah, those scenes are jarring when he's got the black mask on. He's just hurling flaming things into people's basements, he sets two buildings on fire
yes,
willy-nilly, regardless of how many other possibly innocent people happen to be there. Yeah, it's very exciting.
or horses tied up in the barn, or the, I two things I just want to mention, and then I'll shut up and let someone. One was you were talking about getting away with Thomas H. Ince. Interesting that Hillier went with them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting in itself as well, that they had that relationship.
They had a similar vision as to how the Western should be presented and portrayed. And so you notice they co-wrote the screenplay, and
Right.
Lambert directed. And that was all, they were really a team. They were really working together on this.
I was wondering if William S. Hart actually might have, uncredited, might have been a co-director.
I agree completely that that's a strong possibility. Gino, what do you think? You think Hart probably directed some of this?
He probably did.
Yeah.
He probably did. And this level of conversation is leading me to ask this question. Of the Hart collaborators, who do you think he made his most potent work with? And by potent, I mean powerful, like really, like some of his tightest work. Do you think it was with Lambert Hillier or with C. Gardner Sullivan, who also frequently collaborated with Hart?
Boy, that's
I mean, for my money, if you're talking consistently, it would have to be Hillier, just because they work together on so many things and so many of the kind of weird transitional things as well. Do you know what I mean?
And that Hilliard followed Hart to his own production company.
Right.
I think they had that connection that goes beyond just work, that more than cinematic connection.
Yeah.
So apparently, Fritz doesn't appear in all of the later Ince films because at that point, I read this. I mean, I don't know what the truth is exactly, but supposedly Hart at some point was like, "I'm not having my favorite horse appearing in your films anymore," basically, and refused to allow Fritz, although he continued to appear in some of those later Ince films. At some point, he said, "No, I'm not having my horse until." So it's interesting that it is Fritz back for this, his first film, where he's no longer under the control, I guess, or whatever you want to say.
He had a contract to fulfill, and he was honorable enough to fulfill it. But Fritz didn't have any contract, and he said, "You know what? I'm not. You can't have my horse. I'm stuck here, but you can't have my horse." And the minute Bill got away and Lambert came with him, Fritz was there too.
Difficult to sign a contract with a hoof.
That's true. That's true. That the pen can get stuck in one of the holes of the horseshoe.
Yes, it's dangerous. The other thing before we I was fascinated to hear about the toy that the toy that grew up, which is at first but actually that's a rather good title for such a show. But I was just wondering, when you're watching that in the early 60s, so you're 3 decades away as opposed to close to a century, how did these films already seem like from such a bygone era and alien, or were they slightly more recognizable and comparable to contemporary entertainment?
No, silent films were looked upon as archaic in the 1930s. Remember, they used to cut them up, add music and narration, and make fun of them as short subjects. They used to do that. So in the 60s, the toy that grew up wanted to show silent movies as a significance to film history. So they were considered very old and very archaic. And remember, William S. Hart had died probably 20 years before I saw that movie. When did he die? 46, was it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it was about time, maybe 18, 19 years before I saw that picture. And so he was an old star that I hadn't heard of up until then. And he was, it was a silent movie, which were very archaic by then. Old enough to have gone to black and white movies first run, but even that was phasing out by that time. The last black and white movie I saw first run at the theater, not counting for artistic purposes, is The Money Trap with Glenn Ford, and that's probably 1966. After that, they were all in color.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you get to see Night of the Living Dead on its first run? That would have been.
Oh yeah, I did, but that's for artistic purposes. Well, actually,
yes.
that's because Romero couldn't afford color films.
Possibly.
But
Right.
But stuff like Clerks and Schindler's List, I don't count those. Young Frankenstein, I don't count those because they were like black and white on purpose, not black and white because that's how we do it.
Yes. Apparently, Night of the Living Dead is the last example of a film made in black and white for budgetary reasons. You're quite right, but it is fascinating. It's almost it's like a Rubicon, isn't it? It's like you said, already in the 1930s, people are making fun of these films. It's fascinating because,
and there was also a television program that was sort of like an MST3K for silent films called Fractured Flickers, which I believe was who was the host? That was Edward Everett Horton, right? Or who was that? Or am I getting that confused with something else?
Jay Ward produced it.
Yeah.
Was it Hans Conried?
Yes, I think it was him. Yes.
Yeah,
it must have been better than Mystery Science Theater, surely.
Yeah, they would.
Come now, gentlemen. It's not.
I remember they would take clips of Hunchback of Notre Dame, and they would provide narration indicating that he was a failed cheerleader, and they'd show up bouncing around and 2, 4, 6, 8. Who are you? And dub stuff like that in. And believe it or not, that's the first time I saw Hunchback of Notre Dame was as a featured flicker, and I thought I was a kid. I thought it was a comedy with a funny-looking guy. I don't know. So,
I mean, that's massively disrespectful, but 10 times funnier than any gag I've ever seen on Mystery Science Theater 3.
I wouldn't say there's a scene in this that I love because I think it prefigures a lot of like cool action movie dialogue. There's a scene where it's in the middle section of the film where William S. Hart is just full of rage. He's setting fire to everything. And some guys come out. I think I don't know if they're in the saloon, but anyway, 2 guys come out and kind of look after him. And one guy says like, oh, are we going to go after him? He's like, go after him. I was just looking to make sure he's gone. And there was something about that exchange that was like, that could be in a movie now. There's something
about hard boiled, isn't it?
Yeah. It's very much ahead of its time. And then
it's like that great line in the Farewell, My Lovely film with Robert Mitchum, right? The ceiling's the limit. One of my favorites.
And then at the end, I mean, it's major spoiler here, but our villain of the piece, Jordan, like Hart, not only does he strangle him to death, but then he hurls him off a cliff. And like again, I went rigid in my. I was like, "What the hell?" Not expecting that. Fantastic ending, and also I assume that this is partly why he then doesn't get the girl. I think in a way, in his kind of feeling of moral obligation, whatever, he can't marry this woman knowing that he's murdered her ex-husband and the father of her child. I wonder if that piece of it.
It works better with an older actor than a younger one, too. I think it worked for him here, and I think he understood that. We should give some shout out to the actor who played Jordan. Was that Joseph Singleton or something like that? Was that?
Let me take a look here. Yes, Joseph Singleton. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. I think he was in the Douglas Fairbanks parody, The Good Bad Man. So
yes, which I haven't seen yet. I have watched.
Singleton, I think, is in that.
Oh yeah, we might do an episode at the very end of because we have discovered a few other. There is the the Buster Keaton one as well.
Frozen North, yeah.
Frozen North, which I have seen. So I think we might do a little round table at the end of the films referencing William S. Hart.
William S. Hart didn't like that, by the
I'm
way.
sure he didn't.
He didn't like his image being killed. Some people had a sense of humor about it. He didn't like that. So, yeah.
Nick, it's interesting that you bring up, the fact that Hart at the end of this film, feels like since he murdered this woman's husband, that he can't be with her. Doesn't that also echo the ending of Wagon Tracks in a weird sort of a way?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Sure.
Where he, he can't be with, what was her name? Jane Novak, who was the actress in that film. As much as he would like to be with her, he's like, yeah, I kind of was responsible for your brother getting killed, so I should probably screw off and let you live your life.
Do we know anything about? Because I haven't read any contemporary reviews. Obviously, like a film like this impresses us now, but I can also imagine when it was new, maybe some critics and audience at the time might have hated its moral ambiguity. I'm wondering, did it like did it split people? Were people quite angry about it? I can imagine some people might have been.
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, Clive, because I do have a couple of reviews here. This is from a publication called WIDS from April 25th, 1920. Quote, "This is Bill Hart's first picture produced by his own company, and will say he's made a good start with a story written by himself and for himself with the cooperation of Lambert Hillier, who directed. The Star is quoted in the papers distributed by the producer as saying Tollgate is the best picture he ever produced. It is indeed a fine picture, but best is putting it a little too strong. The story is not quite as good as some he had previously. The quality of the production is first class, and there are many artistic touches." And then this review is from Lewis Reeves Harrison of Moving Picture World of May 1st, 1920. It is, quote, it is the story of an outlaw without an attempt to gloss over his character. To the contrary, while it shows his better traits and sympathetic moments, it does not avoid the truth as to his bitter vindictiveness and small store of scruple. Hart is supposed to be at home in the role of an outlaw, but his skill of portrayal is far from being merely a question of type. He represents the combined daring and cunning of the American fighting male. He not only looks the part, but acts it with keen intelligence. There constantly shines in his eyes the combined pugnacity and caution of the true gunman of the West. So there are two reviews right there, contemporary from the time.
And the critics were looking at it pretty intelligently because it was like a grown-up Western, but some audiences found it a little too dark. And
I can imagine. I can well imagine.
And I think they had the perspective of the cowboy hero type of thing, and they found that the ambiguity was a little dark. The concept of a bad guy being a good guy. You guys were talking about being the arsonist, and then having the domestic thing with Anna Q. Nilsson and the little boy. That's incongruous, but it blends together within the character who's so layered, and it's really cool that his giving himself up at the end shows his final act in the picture to be okay. And the fact that sometimes he does things where even he himself realizes that there's an introspection to what he does, because he gets put into this. I don't know if he was longing for it subconsciously, but this domestic situation, and we already know that's not going to last. It's just, this really is a well done, having the chance to screen it again and talk about it in depth with people intelligently has really made me appreciate it on another level entirely.
Also, I'm thinking the greater context, you're talking 1920. I mean, in the real world, there's bomb throwing anarchists, and I mean, it must have freaked some people out to see William S. Hart in that mode,
Yeah.
right? So we want to take full advantage of James being here. Is there anything we haven't talked about the toll gate that you'd like to say, or anything else you want to plug, or anything you
No,
want going on?
no, I think we've been pretty thorough. It was a really interesting, enjoyable discussion.
I'm going to add one more thing. There's a scene near the beginning where we're establishing kind of like that it's when William S. Hart's still the leader of his gang, who are called the Raiders, and they're all in the cave.
Insert football
joke exactly. Yes, and they're all in the cave together, and this is when Jordan, William S. Hart's basically saying, "Okay, guys, we got to take it down a notch. We're being hunted. Everyone wants us dead. We need to stop this." And at this point, Jordan's like, "No, I have one more plan, one more job we're going to do." And as it turns out, this is the job that will throw the entire gang under the bus, basically, so he can make money and betray them all. But at the point at which William S. Hart kind of starts to go, no, we don't want to do this, he says, like, what are we? Just a bunch of, and then this is his words, like, Injun horse thieves, and right behind him, like literally standing behind him, is an indigenous gentleman. And I'm like, dude, I'm right here. like, come on. Like, what? It's just a bit strange little moment. But yeah, clearly one of their team actually is, whether he's supposed to be Apache or Navajo, I don't know. But, he's definitely indigenous.
And didn't the rest of the gang, after the job, they all went to Rio and hung out with Ronnie Biggs and recorded a record?
The Great Train Robbery, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. But no, as I said, what we said, to me, this is definitely in my top 3 so far. This is up there with.
Yeah.
Hell's Hinges is probably still not quite touchable. It's still the high watermark, but this is pretty darn close, and exciting that we're this far into the filmography, and I'm still getting such pleasant surprises, because I think the general opinion is, oh, this is when William S. Hart starts to become increasingly sentimental, increasingly mawkish, and yet here we have a film, and even the kid's not annoying. The kid's quite cute. I know Clive doesn't get along with Charles.
I wanted to know what Clive would have thought of this.
I wasn't best pleased when he pulled him out the drink, but whatever. I get it.
But no, like for me, I was like, ooh, they're still packing a wallop. So I'm hoping we might get 1 or 2 more that have this kind of an edge. But because honestly, I would say the next one we're going to talk about in just a moment, Sand, is definitely hewing back the other direction. It's hewing back towards a bit more saccharine, a bit more sentimental, whereas this is not sentimental at all, really.
No, it's pretty hard-edged. So do you have anything coming up, James, you want people to know about?
Oh, not particularly. I'm working on a book on the films of Humphrey Bogart right now, and it's going to be my 40th book release. That should be out at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. And since we're talking about Westerns, I plan to do a book on the Hopalong Cassidy film series. So we'll see where we go with that. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Cheers,
Thanks
James.
so much, James. Take care.
Take care.
Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot to add, other than, above all, I was bummed to have missed out on the 2 guests, because they sounded like a nice couple of fellas. I enjoyed it. It's actually, now and again, it's actually quite nice to kind of listen to the show and
be a listener instead of a producer.
Yeah. And I did enjoy. I have very little to add. That if indeed nothing to add, that you were all as thorough as always. I think for me, of the 2, Square Deal Sanderson and Wagon Tracks, I think Wagon Tracks was the pick of the show, right? Obviously aided by the fact that it has a amazing restoration. Like the restoration on that was
that's probably sadly no longer available, because it was it's an Olive Films joint, and Olive Films is no
Yeah, no, that does seem to be a shame, because that was a Yeah, no, I mean, I can't imagine it ever being improved upon, really. I mean, and
Right.
nice use, like very sensitive use of like tinting and stuff where it should have
Mm.
been and in the right places and stuff like that. And yeah, William S. Hart. We talk about William S. Hart kind of stretching and stuff. I thought a very emotionally vulnerable performance from William S. Hart in that film, which I was quite impressed by. And the only other thing I wanted to say was how awesome does the Silence Under the Stars event sound? Like
Yes.
that sounds like something I would very much like to go and see. Other than that, yeah,
Yeah, we
you
should
I mean,
probably run a fundraiser. We should probably run a fundraiser to get us all three of us, a trip to Santa Clarita, California, and get us there to the William S. Hart Museum and Hart Park and everything. We really should think about that because you know what? Gosh darn it. I mean, I know that we're just three plebs in this world trying to make it, but you know what? If anybody deserves to go to the William S. Hart Museum and Park and everything, it's us. For after coming this far in the journey and everything, I think that we should have the opportunity to go there at least once in our lifetimes, and I think it would be great to do it all three of us together.
Yeah, I'm down.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's certainly a dream worth hanging on to. But yeah, like I said, above all else, just a shame to miss out on chatting with a couple of very interesting dudes who genuinely seemed. I liked. They both had a enthusiasm
Hmm.
about them when they were talking about the films. Like
And a good
you
sense
could
of humor.
tell,
Both had a great sense.
yes, you could
Nice.
tell they were still getting a kick out of talking about these films. They weren't just,
Yeah, like not
rolling
just going
out
through the
the
motions at
same
all.
old. No, no, no. So that was very. Yeah, it was a nice. It was actually a rather enjoyable listen, I have to say. So there we go. Sorry to not have anything much more of substance, but like I said, you already got there ahead of me. So
Well, I just wanted to give you the due diligence of having you because you did watch the films, and I would have thought it would have been a
yes,
waste of your notes not to have
no,
your
no, no, much appreciated.
say.
No, but it was fun. Like I said, Wagon Tracks in particular was very interesting and important. Nothing wrong with Square Deal. And sorry, not to put Square Deal Sanderson in the shadows. There was nothing wrong with that either. But it was just certainly, and again, that might be slightly unfair because that was in a more compromised condition maybe than Wagon Tracks, right? Which kind of does. I mean, as hard as you try to make that not be a difference, it's just gonna burn itself on your mind more when you see something in that well presented. It's
Right.
invariably the other thing goes into the shadow. Yeah, so there you go. That's all I got.
And now we're going to move on to the second film we're going to be discussing tonight, which is Sand, which
Before
was
you carry on there, I just have to ask Nick something. This might be the case with you as well. I don't know, but Nick, as soon as you heard the title of this film, Sand, did it send you scurrying off to listen to the Lee Hazelwood and Nancy Sinatra duet of the same title? Because I did, and I know you're a big fan as well.
No, I didn't. I mean, I do. Yes, I like strawberry wine a great deal. Is that what it's called, or whatever the something wine, summer wine?
Yes,
Yes. Anyway,
but they do have a Sand. They have that song as well, which is.
I don't think I know that song. Okay, so
Oh, you should check it out. It's great.
I will check it out now.
Yeah, not now.
Not now. I'll wait till we
yeah.
finish recording the show. Yes.
all right. So, Sand, which was released on June 27th, 1920. This was produced by the William S. Hart Company and distributed by Paramount Artcraft. It was directed by Lambert Hillier with a screenplay by Lambert Hillier from the story Dan Curie's Inning by Russell A. Boggs. It was photographed by Joe August and Dwight Warren, and the art director was Thomas A. Brearley. It was edited by Leroy Stone with art titles by Ralph Warren. And the cast consists of Dan Curie being portrayed by William S. Hart, Margaret Young being portrayed by Mary Thurman, Joseph Garber being portrayed by G. Raymond Nye, Josie Kirkwood being portrayed by Patricia Palmer, Pete Beckett being portrayed by William Patton, Jim Kirkwood being portrayed by Lon Puff, Pop Young being portrayed by Hugh Jackson, and the boss not being portrayed by Bruce Springsteen, but being portrayed by Fritz.
Fuck for that.
So here's the plot synopsis of Sand. Sand opens with Dan Curie on the way to Condor to replace a station agent who has grown old in the service of the railroad. The train stops at a small station where a railway holdup occurred, and Curie is told the bandits escaped into the river, and then all trace was lost to them. Arriving at Condor, Dan Curie finds he is to replace Pop Young, father of his sweetheart. He declines the job, but Pop assures him he has another position, so Curie goes to work. Pop's new job is in the general store of Joseph Garber, who also is a stockholder in the railroad and who also aspires to marry Young's daughter. Finding Curie in his way, he manages to have him fired. Curie immediately gets a job on a ranch where he worked many years ago, and at the same time gets his old Pinto pony back. In a talk with a pal, Curie mentions his pleasure at receiving his pony back. Part of the conversation is overheard by his sweetheart, Margaret Young, and she believes he is talking about a girl on the ranch. Believing Curie false, she renounces him and decides to marry Garber. Curie is crushed, but out on the ranch he tries to forget her. One day, while riding near the railroad, he is fired upon by a Mexican. He returns the fire, hits his man, who confesses to a plot to hold up a train which is nearing. Here comes a series of thrilling episodes, fast riding, and a leap from a cliff to the river. Curie arrives on the scene as the holdup is going on, fires at them in the rear, and the gang is captured with the aid of the surprised trainsmen. Pulling off the masks of the bandits, the leader is discovered to be Garber, and at the same time, Margaret Young, who is on the train running away from Garber, appears. Garber is unmasked as the leader of the gang, which has been committing all the holdups, and Dan and Margaret come to the right understanding. So, this viewing of Sand for me was sort of a first time watch because I had seen like half of this film but for some reason I turned it off or something like that. But on this rewatch, I really enjoyed it, and I think I enjoyed it primarily because of, I think, the great presentation that Grapevine Video put on. I think, the beautiful tints and the rather good score that was performed for it. I don't have the name of the fellow who performed the score in front of me, but I think it was a rather lively score for the film. And I think you get some of that wry Hart humor in this that, we didn't get in Tollgate because that was a rather more serious film. And, I like to...
Also, Gino, if I may hazard a guess, I think maybe the reason you would have appreciated it more the second time is probably because you know what you're getting into. Because I think for me, I don't know if there's for Nick, with Sand is a little different, and it's not necessarily we've compared William S. Hart to Clint Eastwood, for example, a few times. It's a bit like when Clint Eastwood would do something like Bronco Billy or Honky Tonk. It's like it's not a full on kind of action film, so you're a little disappointed. But then I suppose if you know what you're getting into, so I'm guessing, Gino, maybe the second viewing for you was you were kind of resigned to it not being a certain thing, so you could appreciate it on its own merits. Do you think that's part of it?
That could be part of it. I think another part of it was just being, I think actually I was just a bit more alert during this viewing than I was in the past viewing that I tried to have. Sand, after coming off of the rather brilliant Tollgate, Sand is kind of a weak whimper of a film, by comparison. It's right. By no means a bad film. I don't think William S. Hart really ever made a bad film, but it kind of stands in the shadows of other greater films in his filmography. What was interesting in this? Now, I'm not sure if this is the same guy or not, but it very well could be, considering that the time periods are correct. But the guy playing Pete Beckett is a guy by the name of William Patton. Well, he was a guy who made B-Westerns as the lead hero in a lot of silent Westerns. William Bill Patton, there's a few films of his that survived. And according to Yakima Canutt, now this quote has been attributed to both Bill Patton and Dick Hatton. So it's either one of them, who this quote that Yakima Canutt said is attributed to, but I guess Yakima Canutt said of Bill Patton or Dick Hatton. He said that there's only three things that Bill Patton is afraid of: horses, guns, and the great outdoors. so there you go. But
Dick Burn there by Yakima Canutt.
yeah, I mean, but it's great to see in this filmography, of this William S. Hart filmography, we actually have gotten used to now not seeing him get the girl at the end and not seeing him win quite a few times now. So it is nice, to get a positive Bill Hart ending for once, after, dealing with a lot of endings where he's either killed, doesn't get the girl, or is shivering in a cabin in freaking Alaska with his getting hypothermia.
This one isn't on the William S. Hart incel box set.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gene. I think what's funny about this film is that there's parts of it that I really like, and then there's parts of it that don't work as well for me. One of the things I think is really great is actually the interplay between Hart and the actor playing Joseph Garber, G. Raymond Nye. I think their loathing for each other somehow transcends space and time, and I can, more than anything, I could feel the sneer on the title, the intertitle cards, which normally I don't get a strong sense of emotion. Mm-hmm. And I love the way William S. Hart responds in monosyllables to when that guy talks to him, he's always maybe.
Yeah.
No. just I have no time for you. You're an ass.
I can't even waste an extra word on you. Yeah.
My favorite part of that whole exchange in the beginning is, Garber's like, "You're going to go to work or I'm going to teach you a lesson." And then Hart just puts his foot on a barrel and just stands there for a little while. And Garber's like, "Well, what are you waiting for?" And then Hart's like, "The lesson."
Yes. Oh, yeah. And then another of my favorite scenes, and I any movie that features a chicken prominently right away has me won over, right? But particularly this one. Because you get this chicken in the road, and this is when William S. Hart is basically proving to Garber that he is a crack shot, right? So he basically takes a shot at the chicken, and the chicken jumps out.
Yeah.
And then he shoots, I don't know, a button or a coin, or whatever. The kind of the
interesting fact, by the way, for the chicken enthusiast, people might not know this, because I just made it up. But a lot of tragedy in that chicken family. This chicken's grandson was the chicken in Pink Flamingos. So there you go. A lot of tragedy in the chicken family.
That's yeah, and I believe some of the cousins went on to be in Monty Hellman's Cockfighter, which is also not a great place for a chicken to be. But no,
it's tough being a chicken in this business.
But what I loved about that scene was that the chicken actually gets to have a reaction shot again.
Yes,
the chicken then comes back into frame and goes it gives you kind of a bit of a WTF shrug, what? What was that about?
Yes,
it's great scene.
I do like as well. It's a shame the film isn't a little bit more exciting as well, because I do like the idea of William S. Hart as a railroad agent as well, because that's a slightly different thing. And there's a definite paucity of, as far as I know, there might be maybe more lurking in the 20s and 30s. There's a paucity of films about railroad agents and railroad bulls and things like that. And I because I love films set on trains, things like, The Narrow Margin and stuff like that. I like films set on trains. And so it's a shame. I really like...
What's the one? Again? What's the one? It's Borgnine. What's the one about the two, the guy?
Emperor of the North.
That's the one. Yes.
Yeah, which is a good film, a Robert Altman film. So I'd like to be able to more fully get behind a William S. Hart as a railroad agent.
I think there are some other William S. Hart films that
might be,
that do have. I mean, there's a film in his filmography called Wolves of the Rail, so I would assume that's about him, working a railroad, and there's also.
Are these extant ones we'll actually be seeing, or are they sadly lost ones?
Sadly lost ones. And then there's another one called the Border Wireless, which I believe is also another train themed one, but that one's also another one not available to us. So maybe someday, if the Museum of Modern Art and all these gatekeeping archives would, finally see to it to release some of these films out to the public, maybe then we'll be able to come back to the table in about 50 or so years when I'm gray and you guys are probably skeletons, and we'll be able to review these things.
Yes, it's just I'm just wondering if it's one of those kind of like forgotten to the sands of time subgenres or something. Do you know, like once upon a time there was a spate of railroad agent films, because we certainly haven't had them in recent times. I don't even know if a railroad agent is even I guess it is, like if a crime is committed on a train crossing state lines, I'm guessing it would make sense. Would you or would it just be federal? And anyway,
I think you have to bring in Hercule Poirot. I think you have to go all the way to Belgium if you need to solve a crime on a train, Clive. That's my...
The other thing is, as well, considering the title, I could have done with a bit more fucking sand. There's not much sand in this
Yes.
film.
Hang on. I believe you'll note, Clive, that that's a metaphorical title, because near the end he talks to...
I don't understand.
Yes, yeah. I think you'll find that at one point he talks about sand in a more of a sense of having guts.
I see. That's a bit highfalutin for my tastes.
Yes. So
it could have as well have been called salt or cactuses or something.
I think guts. I think if you like, the better synonym will be guts. That's what this was all about.
Okay.
Well, I certainly think it's a lot better of a title than, I mean, you're right. The title Sand for this film doesn't really make much sense in the grand scale of things, but I still think it's a better title than the original story for this, which was called Dan Carey's Inning.
It's like a baseball.
Don't get me wrong. I like the title. It's like Sand actually is an awesome title along the, like Intolerance, or like if it was a film set in the baking desert or like Greed or something, like Sand is actually quite an awesome title, but it's got almost fuck all to do, despite Nick's highfalutin.
I'm pretty sure that's where the title comes from, but I was, his horse is called Boss.
The Boss, yes.
Yeah, which is great, because then I immediately thought, is that what that song Boss Hoss by the Sonics is about? Do we know? Were they big fans of William S. Hart?
It makes me wonder if Bruce Springsteen was a fan of William
S.
Hart.
There we go. We need to bring in a cricket. We need to bring in a cricket sound effect for when I make jokes that don't land, Gino. So if you want to get on top of that, it's in a little.
We need a little tumbleweed gif. Which is quite apt.
I would suggest Springsteen, but considering his left-leaning values, I don't think he would be necessarily the biggest fan of William S. Hart, but that's besides the point. But yeah, Sand, I love...
Well, the thing as well is, if we have a Bruce Springsteen fan on the show, I'm just going to end up asking him, what the fuck's wrong with you? So that's not going to work.
Yeah, but, to get back to Sand, I mean, it is one of those epic titles, that you hear, Sand. Or
you can imagine like Joseph von Sternberg's Sand, right? Something like that.
I think it's the exclamation
now you have like Sandra Bullock in Gravity, for a more modern example.
Right.
But it's not. I mean, I myself was curious as to why this film was called Sand until that very moment that Nick discussed. You got to show your sand, okay, we are like three schmucks in the year 2026 talking about these films. Maybe that was an expression back then. Maybe showing your sand was a common expression back in 1920 when this came out. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. That's the title.
That's the one word title of our film, by the way. Schmuck.
But to get beyond the title, I think the highlight of this film for me is Hart having that wry humor with G. Raymond Nye. That was pretty much the highlight for me. I mean, there
Yeah.
are some good stunts in this, like when Hart jumps into
Yeah.
the drink with Fritz and everything else, and it was nice to see, Hart and Fritz having, some good interplay with each other and everything else. That was really nice to see as well. You really get to see Hart's love for Fritz, especially in this film. So that was really nice to see the love between a man and his horse. I mean, that's always
Yeah,
nice to
although
see.
you got to be careful apparently about how much you express that love for that horse verbally, because apparently it's very easy for the woman of your life to misunderstand who you're feeling these deep, powerful yearnings for. Because
Yeah.
she,
Yeah. Also, not to mention the Bodil Jensen approach is also taking it too far. Right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. The I like another thing I like about this film is that at the end of the film, there's this moment where one of the railroad folks says like, "We caught these Mexican bandits too," and then William S. Hart's like, "Mexicans," and that's when he does the reveal that like, "Oh, it's actually a bunch of rich white guys who've been doing this," and that was for me a kind of a unexpectedly progressive little move, right? To have in fact, yes, there are some Mexican kind of bandits in the film, but they're treated relatively sympathetically. And then, as it turns out, yeah, they're the real bad guys.
This could
am I
be.
thinking of the previous film? I'm thinking of the previous film. I'm thinking of the Toll Gate, which has the Mexican bandits. So yeah, this film doesn't have any Mexican bandits, right? It just has these white dudes pretending to be Mexicans.
Maybe this was, Hart atoning for the sins of the Aryan, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, it could very well be possible. I'd like to think of William S. Hart as a guy, at least within the boundaries of race relations. I'd like to think of him as a guy who was a bit more progressive than a lot of the other guys in Hollywood at the time. I mean, especially, we discussed wagon tracks in the previous episode, and how the Native Americans in that film aren't necessarily treated as these broad savages that they were treated as in a lot of other films. It's like, hey, you killed one of our guys, we're gonna kill one of your guys. And Hart's like, yeah, sure, that's fair. It's like,
And there's also the African American band that plays on the riverboat in that film too, which again they're sympathetically portrayed. There's no
and at least in the extant film of the Aryan, until the very last half of the film, I mean, yes, the Mexicans are painted with a wide brush, but but it's not until that very last part of the film where the Mexicans are sort of portrayed as the ruffian villains, and thanks to our friend Bruce Calvert, who's a loyal listener to the show, he actually explained the context of why that was.
Right.
It's not like it's not like these things were done for no purpose. So I think, but you're right. It is good that I mean, I was surprised by that as well. I legitimately thought myself that they were going to be like legit Mexicans at the end of the film, being unmasked and everything else. But then Hart's like, Mexican. He's like, Mexicans? Hell. Pulls off the masks and it's G. Raymond Nye. I love that. That was brilliant.
Also, we should give a shout out to Calamity Jane, Annie Oakley, whatever she is, like the little cowboy girl, right? That
Patricia Palmer. Oh yeah, that the whole thing about her proposing to Bill Patton's character. That's quite progressive for the time too. I'd like to think.
Yep. And then, so as it turns out, yes, vocabulary.com defines one of the definitions of sand is fortitude or determination, meaning backbone, grit, gumption, guts, or moxie. So there we go. A little vocabulary lesson for our listeners. You can use
courtesy of Professor Nick Sheehan.
Professor, yes. If you want to start, maybe we need to bring this back. We need to start talking about how that guy's got some sand. That's showing some sand. I don't know. We'll try. We'll see if we can bring it back.
Work in progress there.
Yes.
You could say something along the lines of, hey, that son of a beach has a lot of sand.
Yes, there we go. Do you know we got it? Okay, we're gonna bring it
And
back.
you were talking about your crickets chirping earlier, Nick.
Just gonna have to have we'll have that on speed dial, a little button. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
no, it's and this, as I said, in this one, yes, it is a bit more mawkish. We do get some great scenes of William S. Hart just weeping openly, hugging his horse because the girl he loves is going to marry somebody else. But we also get him like when he first shows up to the town and he's realized, oh, I've been given this job and I'm replacing the father of the woman I love. He immediately is like, nope, I'm leaving. I'm quitting the job right away. And they have to actually convince him, no, stay. So we see right from the get go. This is
Yeah, he's not being the usual good bad man in this. He's
no,
actually a
he's
man
pretty
of
much just a
honor in
good guy.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's very much a kind of
And
a
I
nice
think it's a
guy.
rare instance of that in one of his films where he's legitimately the good guy all the way through. Like he's
Yeah.
not like an outlaw, sort of rebranding himself here. He's basically like, yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah. And they mentioned he has been previously fired from a job or something, but it wasn't really his fault and he had to go on the
Yeah.
run. Yeah, but in this case, he was in the right. So yeah, it's not, you're right, it's not the typical good guy go or bad guy, good guy, whatever,
Yeah,
good bad
again,
man.
like I said, even though it wasn't for me necessarily, not that I hated it.
Hmm.
Again, it is interesting to see uh, William S. Hart doing something again, changing it up, right? Like,
Mm.
so he could just, fuck it, I'll just play a regular, straight up hero, and also, a railroad agent. That's kind of closer to. It's still, it's still the West, but it's a little closer to a more um, like a modern urban profession rather than someone who kind of just wanders around the plains or something like that, right? So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see when we get to because I'm assuming we probably will watch Show People, right?
Well, it's
So,
funny you should bring that up, because the very next film that we're going to be reviewing is the film The Cradle of Courage, where William S. Hart plays an old gangster
great.
comes back and he's like this, I guess this actually World War One hero at this point, and or something. That's actually a film I haven't seen,
Okay.
but I'm very
I'm
much
very.
looking
I don't
forward
know
to
why.
seeing it.
I think it's because we've got into him so much and we've enjoyed seeing. I'm really, really looking forward to just seeing William S. Hart just like wearing a suit or something,
Right.
or cowboy hat. I'm very keen to see him in that mode because he's such the kind of weathered kind of man of the earth, man of someone out under the sky all day, apart from maybe popping into a saloon or a cantina to set on fire. So it's going to be nice to see him as someone who dwells in houses, and
Mm.
it's going to be
Right.
interesting to see him in that mode, I think.
I wonder too if he won't kind of. James was talking earlier about Humphrey Bogart. When I picture William S. Hart in a suit, in a weird way, I kind of conflate that with a bit of Bogartiness in that, because again, Bogart, like William S. Hart, didn't really hit his stride and become famous until quite late.
Right,
I mean, like
right.
he was more in his 40s, 50s when he started getting leading roles. I mean, up until then, he was just always heavy number three or whatever, or thug number five.
The main difference is, for some reason, I think William S. I'm imagining him like I don't know what it is about, and I'm a big Humphrey Bogart fan, but every time I see Bogart and there's a close up, I swear I can smell his disgusting breath that that Lauren Bacall was fine with. But I would imagine everyone else was like, "Oh, Humphrey, fucking brush your teeth, man!" Like he just looks
I'm
like a
sorry.
man who would have
Okay, so this is something that you've
bad
entirely
breath.
invented from whole cloth, Clive. This is not something that's a
No,
known
absolutely.
fact.
It's a total hatchet job. But I bet I'm right. But William S. Hart, I think, he would have had a lifesaver, some gum or something. I don't think he
Yes,
would
like
have. Yeah,
some lavender drops.
yeah.
I mean, William S. Hart probably went from the toll gate to the coal gate. You know what I mean?
Hey, my God!
Hey,
Gino is on fire.
That was pretty good.
It was better than the Son of the Beach one. Yeah.
Which I liked as well, actually. So,
But well, when I look at Humphrey Bogart, the B Western film fan in me can't help but think of, the B Western version of Humphrey Bogart, which was Lash LaRue. But it's yeah. I mean, to circle this back, I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing, the non-westerns that William S. Hart made around that time, like Cradle of Courage and The Whistle, which is a film that we have discussed briefly before. That's the film where William S. Hart and his son are factory workers and such, and a big mishap happens at the factory involving William S. Hart's son in that film, which Clive will no doubtly enjoy.
Yes.
But yeah, as far as Sand is concerned, I think it's I think that a good something that we should do towards the close of this podcast, in addition to reviewing some of the outliers, like Frozen North and everything like we had discussed before, and the Saga of William S. Hart, which is the documentary film. I think we should dedicate an episode to discussing our top 5 favorite William S. Hart films, and maybe even our top 5 least favorite, and sort of having like a round table discussing those.
Have to dredge the memory banks for that one, but yeah, could do. I mean, top ones for sure. That would be easy enough to do.
Yeah.
Although I suspect we'll probably all have the same, but yeah, we could.
Yeah.
We could, throw it in at the end of the very last episode, because we are going to read some books as well, right? I think.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay.
For me, Sand is definitely it's middling. It's in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not the worst by far, certainly, and but it's not near the top either. It's kind of right there, comfortably in the middle, and it's not bad.
Yeah. Not everyone has to be great, right? In a long career, and fuck, I mean, who knows what gems lie in all the ones we're not even able to see.
Right.
That way madness lies. You can't spend too. Yeah. You can't think.
If you haven't already noticed, Nick, I went mad a long time ago. I'm good with that. It's fine.
Okay, all right.
I mean, let's I mean, we've delved into our thoughts on Sand. Something that I never thought of doing, during this entire run of this podcast, is reading the contemporary reviews of the time, because, they are contained in the Diane Kaiser-Krasarski book, The Complete Films of William S. Hart, Pictorial Record. There are like contemporary film reviews in here, at least 2 of them for each film. So let's take a look at what M.A. Mullaney of the Moving Picture World of February 14th, 1920 said. This is what he had to say, quote, or she, don't want to, but this is what they had to say. Quote, Bill Hart is back in a true-to-life Western role in Sand, which is announced as the first of the new Hart series that the rugged actor is depending entirely upon his own efforts to put over. And Sand has Sand. It is a typical Hart picture, only somewhat better than those he has been making for the last year or so. It shows careful attention to everything, a novella plot, and enough thrills to make it please most everybody. The Pinto Pony shares honors with the star. The locations chosen for this picture are not very original, but that fact does not deter from its value as entertainment. There are a few river scenes that will command the admiration of everybody. And this is what May Tenay of the Chicago Tribune of 1920 has to say. It may be said of Mr. Hart that as a station agent, he is a fine movie actor. One shudders to think of the collision that would undoubtedly send their hordes into eternity, where Big Bill really at the key with a dark-eyed maid in the offing. True, he uncovers the real bandits who aren't really Mexicans as supposed, but whisper. True, he foils the robbery of the station safe, but also true, he certainly neglects his post, something scandalous in the cause of chivalry. So, take of those 2 contemporary reviews what you will, but yeah.
So do we know what's up
nice
next?
To have an idea what people thought. Because, things go in and out of favor, and some films that were once considered zeitgeist things are just forgotten and no one gives a shit about them anymore. I mean, it's fascinating. Like, have you ever heard a reference in the past, 30 years to for instance, Driving Miss Daisy, which isn't other than just totally derogatory, right? But it's a film that won,
Oscars, yes.
Yeah. But now, whenever anyone mentions that film, it's just to make fun of it, right? So it's interesting, just one example of how things go in and out of favor, and yeah.
And it's interesting to see, things that go the opposite way too, like Duck Soup, and the Marx Brothers, how that film was a massive bomb when it came out, but then everybody nowadays praises it as one of, if not the greatest comedies ever made, if not the greatest war satires ever made. So it's interesting to see how, it dovetails in both directions.
Yeah. All right. Ride us out there, Gino.
Yes.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for listening to this latest episode of Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast. I have been Gino Cuddy, and my co-hosts have been Nick Sheehan and Clive Davis. And we would also like to extend a very special thanks to our guest, Mr. James L. Neibaur, author of over 39, soon to be 40 books on film history. And I guess that about does it. In the words of William S. Hart, adios amigos. God bless you all, each and every one. Good night.
This has been a Gino Cuddy podcast production.